Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Hi, my name is Rick Anthony, and I must say I am a true radio geek. And if you're a radio geek like me, you are going to love this podcast interview. Now, if you were lucky enough to be like me and grow up in Chicagoland in the 60s and 70s, you got to experience some incredible talent. These jocks on the radio were some of the greatest of all time, and they became part of the soundtrack of our lives. In my world, WLS and WCFL were on all the time, playing top 40 music. They were blaring out of my transistor radio or my car radio. Names like Larry Lujack and John Records, Landecker, Bob Surratt, Fred Winston, Dex Card, Dick Biondi, and Charlie Van Dyke were more than just a voice on the radio. They actually helped mold me into the radio personality that I became. So this Labor Day weekend, my friend Ted Gordon Smucker is doing something incredibly special. For more than 60 hours, he's actually turning back time and allowing us to once again experience some of the greatest voices in radio and the music that we grew up with. Will you please welcome my friend Ted Gordon Smucker? How you doing, my friend?
Hey, Rick, I'm doing fine. How are you?
I love what you're doing, man. Like I said, I am a true radio geek, so this is right in my wheelhouse. And when you pitch this to me, I'm going, oh, dear God, I got to get this on. I got to do this one. And so I moved some guests around to make sure that this would air right before Labor Day, because this is something, it would be kind of pointless to do it after Labor Day, because this is something I want everybody coast to coast to check out. Let's find out first a little bit about you, Ted. Your passion for radio and obviously LS and CFL. Where'd you grow up and what's your story?
Yeah, grew up in northern and a little town called Middlebury, Indiana. It's right off the Indiana Toll Road, halfway between Ohio and Illinois, which put me in a good position to hear radio because AM radio traveled real well from Chicago, WLS and WCFL. Also came in well from Windsor. And I was
LW, yeah.
LW, yeah. And at night, I'd pick up WABC, and all day long, booming in like the next door neighbor was WOWO in Fort Wayne.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, radio, yep.
And so anyway, yeah, I grew up in northern Indiana, and I fell in love with radio like you when I was, I don't know, probably around 8 or 9 years old. I started listening to the Chicago stations and really got a kick out of the DJs, such as guys like Barney Pip and Ron Britton. Those guys, I'd listen to before going to bed at night and thought, man, someday I want to do what they do.
But that's the exact parallel of mine. I grew up, and of course, I used to listen to the music and such, and because I was out and doing on my bike or whatever it might be, and it was my brother who taught me to actually listen to the personalities, and from there, that basically changed my life. Yes, I'd listen to the music, but I would listen to the way the audio was delivered from the announcers. And that was just it totally changed me. It totally changed my view of things. And next thing you know, I'm doing radio shows in my upstairs bedroom with my neighbor friend. And, it's just here I'm 16. You can hear my voice crack on some of these old Airchecks that I had.
I some of those too, and they're under lock and key. I do. And I set up this little radio station in my bedroom. I'd record the songs and the jingles from the stations that I listened to, get some commercials and put them on my cassettes, and then, dub with the music, my voice. Oh, and I thought I was playing big time, but of course it was just in my room and my own.
I know, that's just it. And then just great. And then my parents saw that I had a passion for it. Next, I've got a CB radio, and they've upgraded my stereo, and I've got some pretty cool stuff. And luckily, I got a chance to join the Air Force for Armed Forces Radio and Television, and that basically got my career going. How about your career? How did your career in broadcasting take off?
Well, I was in high school, and I started working at two local stations. I was halfway between Goshen, Indiana, and Sturgis, Michigan. So I started doing part-time work at both of those little stations. And then when I went to college at Taylor University in Indiana, I began working in Marion. And then after graduation, began full-time in Marion because it was just part-time during college. Eventually I moved to Fort Wayne, but I moved to Fort Wayne in sales and worked at the powerhouse combination of WMEE and WQHK at the time, which was very, very big in Fort Wayne. And we had numbers that started to rival those of the big powerhouse, as I mentioned earlier, Group W's WOWO, because it was when FM began migrating. Listeners were migrating from AM to FM.
Right, yes.
And so I worked there. And then in 1990, I took a job in TV sales in South Bend, Indiana, at WSBT TV. Worked there 30 years. Yeah. And in addition to doing local sales and national sales, I also did a show about 10 years called Eye on Michiana. It was a 2-minute business interview show. And I would talk to people in the area about their business, and we ran it in the news weekdays and on the weekends sometimes. So I still had a chance to do some, on-air stuff, but my primary job eventually moved into sales. Retired a couple of years ago.
Yeah, very good. I retired too, and I really enjoy doing this podcast because it allows me to talk to great people like you and learn about what's going on this weekend. First, tell us about the website, rewoundradio.com. I want everyone to bookmark that right now, rewoundradio.com.
Well, if you love oldies music and, people that are my age do, they love the oldies. Rewound Radio is really, and I'm going to give a commercial for them there, is really the best place to go for oldies music. The playlist is massive, and the jingles are just tremendous. And I say, why mention the jingles? Well, Jam Creative Productions, John Wolfert, who owns Jam, is a very, very big part of Rewound Radio. And he'll take old jingles and re-sing them from stations all over literally the world and re-sing them for Rewound Radio. And he does a jingle show on Sunday from 3 to 6 Eastern time where he'll dig deep and give you stories about radio jingles and the stations they were on and how they developed them and what the competition was trying to do to take their business and so forth and so on. And it's just a great show. And that's on every week, as I said, on Sunday from 3 to 6. But the proprietor is named Alan Sniffen. And Alan grew up in New York City, and at least in the area of New York. And he was a huge fan of WABC radio, like we are of LS and CFL.
70.
And he was actually a part of the WABC Rewound, in which they, on the air for several years, played Airchecks of WABC. And he was one of the people that came into the studio, talked about the history of the station and so forth, and John Wolfert from Jam would join him in the studio. Well, WABC decided at a certain point that they did not want to do the Rewound anymore, so Alan says, I'm going to do it on my own. So Alan developed Rewound Radio in the image of the WABC Rewound, and he plays music, as I said, 24/7 with great jingles, no commercials. And it runs, as I said, on rewoundradio.com. But he has some special weekends. On Memorial Day weekend, he actually plays 3 days of WABC Rewound. And so it's all WABC for 3 days. And then on the 4th of July weekend, he'll play all Dan Ingram, who was the star of ABC. Yeah.
Know him well. Know him well.
Yeah. And he of course, was on WABC and WCBS FM. Mm-hmm. And so they'll feature Dan Ingram shows from both of those stations. And then on Labor Day, they would do WOR FM. Mm-hmm. It's where Tommy Edwards
710, yeah. 710 AM, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But WOR FM.
OR FM, yeah, okay. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, and they have the Drake format, the CKLW, WRKO, KHJ style. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, they would run reruns or rewound WORFM on Labor Day weekend, but they only had about 40 hours of tapes. So I contacted Alan Sniffen and I said, Alan, would you ever consider doing WLS or WCFL in Chicago? And he said, I would love to do it if I only had the tapes. So that was all I needed. I started gathering tapes and contacted Alan and said, we got it. We can do it. And Alan was so gracious in giving me the keys to the station and letting me drive for 3 days last year.
Wow.
And we had so much fun. He said, let's do it again this next year.
Awesome.
And if it keeps on going as well as it did last year, hopefully for many years to come.
Awesome. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But before we continue, I'd like to say thank you so much for tuning in to the Someone You Should Know podcast. We're on the web at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast.com. You're going to hear recent news, our archive of past episodes, and a whole lot more. Plus, if you happen to be there at the website, we invite you to leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And I just got some stats here I think is just absolutely amazing. We found out that we are heard in over 1,500 cities around the world, 75 countries. And I want to salute a couple of those cities: Tallahassee, Florida, Colorado Springs, Colorado, Birmingham, England, and the UK. Thanks for tuning in. The Someone You Should Know podcast, heard wherever quality streaming audio is available. And on this podcast, we're talking to Ted Gordon Smucker. Once again, it is called the 2023 WLS WCFL Rewound, happening this Labor Day weekend. When does it start, Ted?
It starts at 6 a.m. Eastern time and will run really well past midnight Eastern time on Monday night, Tuesday morning. So total probably 66 to 69 hours, depending on how the timing goes. But it's going to be at least 66 hours.
I have to ask you, when you put it together for the first time last year, how many man hours did you put in it?
Well, you know what? I didn't count them. I retired a couple of years ago from the television station, so now I have some time to do this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And to start off, Rewound Radio lent me the talents of a guy named John Troll. And John Troll produced the Rewound Radio DJ Hall of Fame every Saturday for 7.5 years. Now, let me tell you what that is. On Saturday noon, Eastern time, every single week, Rewound Radio does the DJ Hall of Fame, and they will feature DJs from around the nation, even sometimes around the world, maybe a BBC or a pirate radio or something like that. But generally, different cities each week. And last week was WKNR in Detroit, Keener,
Okay.
13. And so John, well, he showed me what to do. He helped me take the Airchecks that I had already gathered, whether recording them myself or having traded some Airchecks over the years with other people. He showed me how to restore those. And what he said,
by the way, the audio is incredibly clean, so I want to give you props on that. It is such a clean sound.
well, I want to thank John Troll, but more recently, Bill Shannon. Bill joined the team. John works a full-time job, or it did, and Bill stepped in, and he was with the WLS Rewind with Kipper McGee and Jay Philpott and Scott Childress and many of the other people that produced the actual live reunion show in 2007. And of course, 2008 was another year of the Rewind. They only did it 2 years in Chicago. But Bill has taken over as far as technical advisor and Aircheck restorer. And he is the man that buffs and polishes these to sound so much better. You wouldn't believe some of the tapes that we got, that what we had to work with originally and how it turned out at the end. The difference is just incredible. You know, before and after thing is just astounding. But Bill has worked tremendously hard with me. And I thank him to no end, because he knows how to do the tweaking that I don't know how to do.
It's just
And
it sounds so well. And the strange thing is, every once in a while when you go underneath an overpass, it kind of dips out just a little bit. So that's kind of
yeah, you get near the electrical wires and
the buzzing. No, it sounds so good. By the way, you mentioned a name was a dear friend of mine. It's a mutual friend of ours, Jay Philpott. Jay's now an ops manager for a group of stations up in Oshkosh. I got a chance to see him a couple weeks back. He gave me one of my most coveted Airchecks in my collection, which was the WLS Rewind from 2007 and 2008. This is just amazing. This year is like last year. It's not like the 2007 or 2008. The jocks aren't live. It is actually the Airchecks. Correct? Yes.
It is, everything is stuff we recorded from 1960 up through 1986. There's a couple of 86 shows in there too, and everything in between.
Wonderful. By the way, for those of you outside of radio and haven't heard the term air check before, that's when the DJs talk minus the music. And when we used to go in the studio, we would put our little cassette tape in, and every time we hit the microphone, it would cue the tape, and you would take that into the program director so they can complain about all the things that you're doing wrong on the radio. But luckily, a lot of us have saved it. I have probably maybe 200-300 of my air checks over the years, and it's just amazing. I have to ask you, what was the process of compiling all these air checks like?
Well, it was fun. I had some myself. Tom Connard was
Air Check Factory. Yep, absolutely.
He was a friend of mine. He lived in Belgium, and I had actually spent some time in Belgium many years before he was there. But I knew the country, and I pulled out some air checks to start restoring and so forth when this whole project began, even before that. And I had some tapes that didn't play. And so I looked up Tom's email address, sent him an email, and he replaced the tapes that I had purchased from him years ago. And then he said something to me about sending him a thumb drive, and he would just load it up with all kinds of stuff. And so I did. I sent him a drive in Belgium, and he filled it full of all kinds of Larry Lujak stuff and sent it back to me. And then he and I became even closer because one of the original air checks that he had done, one of the retrospectives, was with John Thompson, who worked at WSBT in the radio side with me. And so I sent Tom Connard a picture of John Thompson, and John signed it and sent him a mug to Belgium. And he got that at his home in Belgium, and he just never forgot it. And we became close up until his death a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And of course, there's Art Volo also. He's the video historian, radio's best friend. He's another one.
Art was just at my house last week.
How's he doing?
He's doing great. He's doing great.
Because I know he had some health problems a while back. I just want to make sure he's doing okay.
Oh, it's fine. He did have some, and he recuperated from those just fine. He's traveling all over. He was down in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and New York, and Cincinnati and Indianapolis this summer. He just gets all over. He really does. And Art opened up his vault of air checks for us to use too. So a big salute to Art. My wife and I were coming back from Quebec, Canada, about a year ago, and we stopped at Art's house, and he let me borrow 3 boxes of reel-to-reel and cassette and CDs that he had from his collection. Tim Banco, originally Windy City Airchecks, had recorded those years ago, and then when Tim died, Art received his collection. So Art was very generous. I loaded these boxes in my car, and then met Bill Shannon. As I mentioned, he's our air check restorer, and he took them to his house, and he dubbed hour upon hour upon hour upon hour. And Bill and I took them back to Art's house about 2.5 months ago, and left with 3 more boxes.
Oh, jeez. Oh, my goodness. That is quite an undertaking that you've done. Now, Ted was nice enough to shoot me some of these promos, and we created, my engineer and I created a little 4.5-minute montage here of just some of the voices that you're going to hear Labor Day weekend. Now, check this out.
Labor Day weekend fun!
Hello?
Is this Ted Gordon Smucker?
Yes, it is.
Ted, what radio station do you listen to?
About half the time it's WLS, the other half CFL. Those are the best stations around.
Well, Ted, here's what that answer gets you. A ton of work.
Oh, yeah?
Your job is to find as many of the original WLS and WCFL Airchecks out there in Radioland.
Can I get a little help here?
You'll play back these classic Airchecks for all to hear. You've got 3 days over Labor Day weekend.
I know. Can we call it WLS WCFL Rewound?
That's the best you can come up with? Okay, WLS WCFL Rewound. All Labor Day weekend on Rewound Radio.
Bill Price, WLS.
Hi, this is Fred Winston, a face for radio and a heart for having fun. Some things never change, you know. Join me and my brotherhood of Chicago radio personalities as we roll air checks from years gone by, all Labor Day weekend right here. It's WLS WCFL Rewound, the best of the best, all Labor Day weekend here on Rewound Radio.
Once again, the boy in the box, who is I, searches for that alleged humorous phone call, who is you. Boogie check, ooh, ah. You talking to me?
I sure am. It's me, that pain in the neck guy who's always annoying you and your fellow jocks. Ted Gordon Smucker here.
Oh, no. Not you again. What do you want now?
I'd like to make a request. Would you please play back old WLS and WCFL radio shows with all the music, the DJs, and the commercials?
Really? Now, well, how would that work?
There's a bunch of old shows out there with you, Larry Lujak, Dick Biondi, Fred Winston, Chuck Buell, Chuck Knapp, Chris Eric Stevens, Bob Surratt.
Wait. I'm trying to figure out what you were saying. You want us to play old radio shows just so that you can remember what WLS and WCFL used to sound like 40, 50, even 60 years ago? If I was even remotely interested, where and when would we even do such a thing? Tell me.
You can play it on Rewound Radio, like for 3 days over Labor Day weekend. It would be great.
Well, I don't know if I'd use the word great.
Labor Day weekend fun! Larry Lujak.
Well, it's my first day on WLS, and I suppose I should go over my secret signals with the engineer.
Larry Lujak.
Okay, Tony's your name. Oh, hi, Tony, the engineer. Now, when I point at the mic, that means I want to talk.
Larry Lujak.
And when I point at you, that means push a button of some sort.
Larry Lujak.
What other signals have I got? When I raise my hand straight up like this, that means I have to go to the bathroom.
Super Jock. Tommy Edwards. WLS.
Hi, everybody. Little Tommy Edwards here. Hey, tune in Labor Day weekend as we bring back the great sounds of Chicago Top 40 Radio. It's WLS WCFL Rewound for your long holiday weekend right here on Rewound Radio.
Hi, this is Brant Miller. Tune in Labor Day weekend and you will hear the great sounds of Chicago Top 40 Radio. It's WLS WCFL Rewound for your 3-day holiday weekend. You can find it right here on Rewound Radio.
BS. Here's the BS Love Counselor.
Hey, it's me, Bob Surratt, inviting you to go back in time and hear the great sound of Chicago Top 40 Radio. It's LSCFL Rewound, all Labor Day weekend on Rewound Radio.
Bob Surratt. WLS. WCFL. Labor Day weekend. Fred Winston, JJ Jeffrey, Bob Surratt, Steve King, Yvonne Daniels, Jeff Davis, Tommy Edwards, John Records, Landrecker, WLS, W, Rewound, CFL.
a little sample of what you're going to hear on the 2023 WLS WCFL Rewound that's going on this weekend. The question I've got to ask you is, how did you manage to get these great voices from the past to voice these cool promos? How much money was involved?
Well, let me just say this. No money was involved.
That's incredible.
Not a penny. I went to an event in August last year in Des Plaines, Illinois. And it was the Rock and Roll Legends Revisited, where John Landecker and Bob Stroud and Tommy Edwards and some other people were there sharing their stories. I had already talked to a few people that I connected with on Facebook, Chuck Buell, for example, and Tom Kent and some others. And then in Chicago or Des Plaines, I met up with John and Landecker talked with him a moment, and Tommy Edwards, and they both said, yeah, we'll do that. And also Mickey Nelson, she was involved in the WLS alumni group, kind of the official mom of the alumni. And she and I talked at that event, and she was very, very much on board. And she was so nice with contacting many of the DJs that I hadn't talked to already and saying, hey, if you can spare, a couple of minutes, would you go ahead and record this promo for our virtual reunion? And we are fortunate to have many of those voices as a direct result of Mickey Nelson's involvement. Now, I wrote the scripts for practically all of those, maybe 85% I wrote, and some of the DJs themselves wrote their own scripts to really make it a personal situation. And so I'm appreciative of that.
I like the interactions that you had with some of the jocks too, as far as like Landecker with the Boogie Check, and one of the first ones we heard was Bill Price, who was the voice of the production of WLS for many years. I think he did a weekend shift also, but that voice, that deep voice, what's your favorite radio station, and he was the one that was giving away all the prizes, so everyone loved Bill.
It was fun, and the attitude and the spirit of some of these guys has just been great. To have Bill recreate that with me was exciting, and have Landecker do a Boogie Check with me was just a huge thrill. But I have to also compliment our production director, Steve Brelsford, who has most of the WLS jingles that were on the air from Pam's and Jam and so forth. And what he didn't have, Bill Shannon had. And between the two of them, we were able to pull out the time-sensitive jingles for each of the DJs and attach them to the voice tracks that they did.
It is so amazing. It was done so seamlessly. You guys did a great job on the production of that. Absolutely love it. As a matter of fact, he was nice enough to send me the entire collection of them. And I spent a couple hours yesterday just going through them, just sitting back going, oh, gosh, the voices. In compiling all this audio, was there something about these two stations that you didn't know before, but you know now? Is a little something that you might have learned just recently?
Well, I have gotten some inside stories.
Sure, go ahead. That would be, we'd love to hear it. Go ahead.
Well, you know what?
As long as you don't get anyone in trouble.
I am going to, some of them I can't share, but some of them we're actually sharing over the weekend. There's something like over a dozen stories that Fred Winston and Lyle Dean, Chuck Knapp, Chris Stevens, Chuck Britton, all these guys shared personal stories, and we're going to pepper those throughout the weekend on Labor Day. So those stories you can hear for yourself, live and direct. Well, not live, taped and direct from the voices of the jocks.
Oh, that's incredible. This is going to be a wonderful weekend, and I highly recommend you make sure you have rewoundradio.com. Do that right now. Go ahead into your browser, rewoundradio.com, and bookmark that so you don't miss out on this weekend too.
If people want to, they can access Rewound Radio on the iHeart Radio app or TuneIn Radio app. They just search for Rewound Radio. And also on Alexa. It's on the smart device Alexa.
Before we go, any final thoughts that we should know about you or this rewind that's going on this weekend that we haven't talked about already?
I do want to kind of go over, because people say, how do you decide who to air, all that kind of thing? And so I wanted to sort of give you the criteria.
Okay, go ahead.
Look at. First of all, we only do unscoped air checks, which means we only want shows that have the full songs intact. If for some reason we find that a song is edited or has bad quality, or they started the air check in the middle of a song or shut the air check off before the song was over, we will restore those songs, because we don't want any short versions of songs running. Right. We want the actual original copies of those, because, for example, Chicago had several different versions of Make Me Smile, the long edits and album versions and so forth. We want to run on these shows the actual version that WLS ran when Chicago first aired.
It would have been the 2-minute and 59-second version to Make Me Smile, which I hated because I love the full-length version.
There you go. But so when we restore them, we don't put the long version in where the short version was.
Yeah, that's right.
Another thing we have to look at is sometimes we do get scoped air checks of people that are no longer with us, and very, very rare air checks are out there of these people. So we'll take for example, a guy named Chuck Williams was on the air on WLS for a while in the early 70s. And the only thing we had was, an air check with scoped music, cutout music. So we restored all the songs in that and made it, which was an original 15-minute air check, made it in an hour and 15 minutes or something like that.
It is really good. That is some pains. That shows some love right there. And that shows real passion.
Bill Shannon is a master at that. I can do it, but he does it so well. He'll take an air check, and the process is he'll take an air check and he'll listen to the speed of the air check. He'll look at the phasing. If indeed two channels are canceling each other out, he'll adjust the phasing. He looks at noise reduction. If there's noise in there, can you get it out? He'll look at bringing up the highs or the lows, depending on what he needs to do. His equalization is tremendous. And he'll just, as I said, make it sound as authentic as possible. So the DJ name recognition is one of the things we look at. The audio quality of the unscoped air check is what we look at. The length, is it 15-minute air check, or is it an hour long? That matters. The date of the air check, because we want to make sure that we play music from all of the 25 or 26 years of the WLS rock era. Mm-hmm. We'll also look at newscasts and spot load. Did a morning show have way too many commercials and way too many newscasts in it for our purposes?
You got some great newsmen too. You got Lyle Dean on there, and that deep voice, Lyle Dean.
Well, it's funny because these guys that I listen to, I've become friends with. Yeah, well, Lyle and Fred Winston and I went to lunch about 2 months ago, and I'm sitting there between Lyle Dean and Fred Winston, having my own personal 1973 morning show.
Oh, jeez. Did you choose the news?
We choose our food.
Choose our foods or choose the news.
Yeah.
God, this...
So that was fun. And also there's a couple other things. The announcer's length of time at WLS or WCFL, because Lou Jack was there for so many years, and some of the others were only there for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So, you have more air checks, and people want to hear the people that they listen to. And since those guys with longer tenure span more years, you're going to probably hear more air checks from them.
Right. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the jocks from LS, but we got CFL jocks too. I mean,
we do. We do.
Yeah. So let's give them a little bit of love. Give us some of the names on the CFL side.
Yeah. Well, Bill Taylor became a good friend of mine. I met him at Art Bolo's house, strangely enough, and he was on the air on WCFL. Johnny Driscoll.
Johnny Driscoll. Yeah, I remember Johnny. Yeah.
He was on the air on WCFL. Now, there were a number that were on both WLS and WCFL. Ron Riley was on LS for a while and went over to CFL. Scotty Brink started on CFL and went to LS. You also had Joel Sebastian that started on WCFL. Dick Biondi was on LS and CFL.
Or was it Dick?
Dick Saint was on both. Yeah. Dick Saint was on both stations too. Chuck Knapp.
Oh, the Napper. Yep.
He was on both stations also. So yeah, we do have a good representation of both stations. And I'm just going to say that it's an honor for me to kind of be an ambassador for both of these stations doing podcasts like this, because this is, basically my life's dream to kind of bring back those stations that were so popular in our lives 50 years ago and let others have a chance to hear them too. And so it's a thrill for me.
I think this is just absolutely incredible. What you're doing is just, if you don't win an award for this, who do I need to talk to?
Not looking for a major award, just looking for some fun with friends is basically what we're doing here.
So you don't need the leg lamp. Okay, great.
No. I actually have one of those. I did get one for Christmas one year. So
I'll never forget. It was Christmas time at WIL in St. Louis because the engineering department put the leg lamp in the engineering bay. It was
very nice. Very nice.
Once again, we're talking to Ted Gordon Smucker. It is the Labor Day weekend, something special, 2023. WLS WCFL Rewound. It starts on Saturday morning, the 2nd of September, 6 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Central Time. It's going to run through midnight Monday, and it is going to be very, very special.
Can I tell you about 3 specials that we have over the week?
Go for it.
Yeah, on Saturday noon, and this is Eastern Time. Saturday noon, we are going to run a WLS Music People. Jeff Davis, out of his own personal collection, sent me this tape. It's an interview with Jefferson Starship. So that run around noon. And then on Sunday, we have Pop Goes the Music, Dick Biondi. And that's a half-hour public affairs program that WCFL did. And they had a different year featured with every episode, and we're featuring 1966 music, and that's Sunday around noontime Eastern. Okay. Monday, a lot of demand here for this. The WLS music montage will be replayed. Yes. And Scott Childers, who's the WS, he's the historian for WLS. He has a website, WLS History, so forth, in Britain. He wrote the book on WLS history. He recreated this montage, and it includes the music that they ran or would have run from 1960. Well, actually, the montage begins 1955.
Right. Yeah. Back around the clock, probably. Yep.
1989. And so Scott recreated this whole thing in stereo. Wonderful. And it's almost a half hour. And so that'll run on Labor Day.
Very good. Very good. That is really cool. I invite everybody once again, you got to go ahead and make sure that you bookmark rewoundradio.com. If you don't do that, I'm going to be disappointed in you. If you are a radio brother or a radio geek like me, you really and truly got to do this. And we're going to wrap up something. You were nice enough to provide this. And this is something that came out in 1974. The band was Reunion. They only had one song, and it was very unusual, almost like a rapping type song. But it was specially done for WLS. I'll never forget hearing that when you wound up hearing certain songs that had WLS mentioned in it. So we're going to wrap up the show with Life is a Rock, but the Radio Rolled Me by Reunion. thanks to my good friend Ted. Thanks so much for being on the show. Ted Gordon Smucker, once again, God bless you. Thanks for being on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Rick. Take care.
BB Bumble and the Stingers, Martha Hooper, Rachel Singers, Lonnie Mack and Twang and Eddie Hisman, ring, we're going steady, take it easy, take me high, lie, house of fire, no commotion, poker, passion, deep and purple satisfaction, baby, got it, gimme, getting hot as Sammy's cooking, Leslie Cora, Richie Valens, end the story, Maha Vista, Fuji, I'm a Kama Sutra, Rama Lama, Richard Perry, Spectre Barry, Righteous Arches, Nielsen, Harry, Shimmy, Coco poppin', Fats is back and finger poppin'.
Life is a rock, WLS rolling, gotta turn it up louder, so my DJ told me, life is a rock, but CFL rolling, at the end of my rainbow, lies a golden oldie.
FMM hits are clicking while the clock is pocket ticket frames and Roman salutation, Brenda and the tabulation, Carly Simon, Eddie Holder, Rolling Stones and the folder, Johnny Cash and Johnny Rivers kissing. Now I got the shivers, Mungo, Jerry, Peter, Paul and Mary, Dr. John, the Nightly Tripper, Doris Day and Jack the Ripper, gotta go, so gotta sweat, Lee and Russell, give me shelter, miracles and smoky places like guitars and Fender basses, Mushroom Omelet, Bonnie Bramlett, Wilson Pickett, stop and kick it.
Life is a rock, but the radio. Life is a rock, but the radio. Woo!
Arthur, Janet, Primal, Screaming, Hawker, Jay and Dale and Ronnie, Kukla, Fran and Norman, Oakland, Denver, John and Osmond, Donnie, JJ, Caleb, ZZ Top and LLB, then DD, Donna, David Bowie, Steely Dan and Sing Me Proud of CC Ryder, Edgar Winter, Jonas Summers, Isaac, Martin, Johnny Thunder, Eric Clapton, Pedal Wallace, Steve LaFoster, Doodah, Good Vibrations, LB, Ronda, Surfing Girl, Little Honda, Tata, Honey, Sugar, Yummy, CBS and Warner Brothers, RCA and all the others.
Life is a rock, WLS rolling, gotta turn it up louder, so my DJ told me, life is a rock, but CFL rolling, at the end of my rainbow, lies a golden oldie. Life is a rock, but the radio rolling, at the end of my rainbow,
Lies a golden oldie. Listen, they're playing our song. Rocket Socket, Allen, free me, Murray, Calvin, try to leave me fishing, swimming.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.